So, of course, I want to start by saying thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Cody Armstrong, and today we're discussing what's new in Onshape. And this is our monthly webinar where we discuss the recent improvements to Onshape. Now, typically we take a look at the previous month. In this case, that would be July. But we're going to cheat a bit today and also take a look at an improvement we added just a few improvements we added just yesterday. So we just added a new update yesterday. We'll talk about the improvements in that update as well. But the idea behind this webinar is really a deeper dive into the improvements in Onshape, and then also an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you'd like. There's a questions section in the GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to ask any question that you'd like, and I'll do my best to stop and answer the questions as we go through today's webinar. It is going to be a short webinar. We're really just going to focus on the last two updates and go through the details of those. So without further ado, let's jump right in. A quick background for those that may not be familiar with our update process. Our update process is a bit different than a more traditional or older CAD system. So we don't have an installed application. Onshape updates every 3 weeks automatically, and it's totally transparent to the end user. So you sign in, and new features are available. Onshape itself has been updated. So this means a few things. You never have to concern yourself with downloads or updates or installs, but it also means that everyone using Onshape is on the latest version, the same version of Onshape. So there's no version discrepancy if you share your data in Onshape. Now, of course, these updates include new functionality, and that's what we're going to be talking about primarily here today. A lot of them include things like bug fixes and a number of different performance improvements. We're going to stick with primarily new functionality. There are a few noteworthy performance improvements with these updates, however, so I will be bringing those up in situations where I think it's relevant. All right, so that's a simple background into how Onshape updates. Just keep in mind, as an Onshape user, you simply sign in and you're on the latest version of Onshape. Now, the agenda today is pretty straightforward. We're going to take a look at the recent updates. There was one in July and then one yesterday. So on August 1st and July 12th, we launched updates. And what I'd like to do is pick a few improvements from each one of those updates and go through and discuss them. And also, of course, as I mentioned before, answer any questions that you have. So if you have any questions, please type them into the questions section in the GoToWebinar control panel. All right, so let's dig into it. As I mentioned before, there are two updates that I want to talk about here today. First, the July 12th update, and then the update that we added yesterday, that we launched yesterday on August 1st. So let's start with a background on the last year. Now, we update every 3 weeks or so. So if you haven't been using Onshape, just keep in mind, if I had to point out 5 or 6 things that we've dramatically changed this year in the last 7 months or so, these are the things I would mention. First off, release management. That was added in March. Simultaneous bill of materials, added very early on this year. So integrated bill of materials in your assembly that also easily inserts into your drawing. We also added configurations. So if you're not familiar with our new configurations functionality, it's definitely important to point out. Also, standard content. Nuts, bolts, screws, and washers are now an integrated piece of Onshape, which you can easily insert into the assembly. And then finally, Onshape Enterprise. Enterprise gives you real-time analytics into your business. It gives you more advanced security controls over your organization. So definitely useful for those organizations that can use those types of benefits. The last thing I would mention is, and this is very hard to give you in a single line item, is that over the last 7 months or so, there have been many drawing improvements. So I could fill more slides with each of the individual drawing improvements that we've had over the last 7 months. But these are just some things I wanted to mention, high-level things that I really recommend you check out if you haven't already. These are all things that we've added just this year alone. All right, so let's get into the last two updates. As I mentioned before, July 12th and August 1st, those are the two updates that we're talking about. And I want to start with, of course, July 12th. And one thing I would stress about these updates is there's an emphasis on drawings, and there's also an emphasis on performance and usability. So those were big things, not only in this update, but also in the August update that I would stress. All right, so let's start with the biggest improvement in the July 12th update, and that is the drawing properties panel. So a big emphasis of this update was on drawings, and the new UI mechanism, the new drawing properties panel, is really useful for a number of new things that you can do to your drawings that you couldn't do in the past. Things like adjust the line thickness. That was something that was controlled by the template in the past. If you wanted to adjust line thickness, you couldn't. Now there's an option within the drawing properties panel to adjust line thickness. Another commonly asked question is, how do we change the colors of a certain thing in our drawings? For instance, I want to change all of the dimensions to a certain color. And you can do that now in the drawing properties panel. Another improvement made to drawings, MinMax Dimensions. So on more organic shapes, arcs, where you need to dimension to the outside edge or inside edge of an arc or a circle, you can now snap to those points. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a bit. But that's a new improvement to, again, Onshape drawings. Some improvements at the assembly level in Onshape: reordering mates, groups, and mate connectors. This one's particularly useful if you'd like to see your assemblies listed in a certain way. For instance, I like to see all the groups, and then all the mates, and then any mate connectors that I may have created. In the past, you couldn't reorder those in the assembly. So I couldn't pair all my mate connectors together, or all my mates together, or whatever it may be. Now you can organize them, and you can grab and drag and move them around. So reorder mates, groups, and mate connectors, just an easy way to organize your assembly. The last thing I would mention with this update is new standard content. A new standard was added to standard content. The DIN standard was added with this update, and a number of pieces of hardware that go with it. So without further ado, let's jump right into the drawing properties panel. And as I mentioned before, this is definitely the big update that took place with this July 12th update. And the big thing with stress is this is now a flyout where it was once in the toolbar. So if you've been using Onshape a while, you're used to clicking the wrench icon in the toolbar. That icon has been moved to the far right of the drawing interface. So you'll see in the far right of the drawing interface a little wrench icon. This is how you access the drawing properties flyout. And again, this has changed, so just keep that in mind. Not only has it changed, but we've added a lot of new functionality that you couldn't do in the past. So if you click the wrench, it brings out the flyout. You have a lot of the things that we could do, things like changing the units of your drawing, right? Changing the decimal separator or the precision of the individual dimensions. Dual dimension options, things like leading and trailing zeros. Those are options that we've had in the past. What I want to point out, though, is that in the drawing properties flyout that flies on the right, you have tabs across the top. And this is how you access the various pieces, the various properties within your drawing. So you're going to have properties for things like units of precision, but also for dimensions. If you wanted to change the height or the font of dimensions separately from annotations, for instance, you can now do that, right? Here's font, height, color options that are specific to dimensions. I think that's the important thing to stress, as well as the typical dimension options, right? Things like gap and alignment and so on. So that's the dimensions tab within the drawing properties flyout. If I move to the annotations tab, we have things like notes, callouts, datums, geometric tolerance, surface finish symbols. The important thing to stress is you can adjust the height or the color of each of these independently. So if you need to adjust notes and make them bigger for whatever reason than callouts or datums or anything else, you can do that. You have that more granular control. I think that's the big thing that I would stress. Question: is it possible to edit any of the drawing properties individually for a single entity, i.e. highlighting a single dimension with a different color or line weight? I believe today that's still a limitation. These are drawing level properties, right? So I think the short answer is no, especially for something like changing the color. But I think even line weight today on a per dimension basis is still a limitation. Also, is it possible to prevent changing one of these properties from affecting the template? These changes will not affect the template unless that template is deleted and replaced with a new template. It would take considerable effort to do that. You would literally need to save this as a new template and then overwrite the old one. It would be tremendous effort. So in short, you shouldn't have to worry about, these individual changes only impact this drawing. It isn't without saving as a template and overriding another one that scenario that you described would happen. All right, so this is the annotations tab. As I mentioned before, you have the ability to set the font or the text height or the color for notes, for callouts, for datums, and you can do that independently. Next to that is the views tab. Now, the views tab has the thickness, and this is one of the more common questions that I get asked often is how would I go about changing, something like the line thickness associated with my drawing. So that's under the Views tab, and you'll see thickness as a drop-down. And you can choose, for instance, let's make this a little bit thicker, and you can see the line thickness goes up here. Let's go back and set that back. Right? Fairly straightforward. The thing I would stress is you can choose visible edges, tangent edges, hidden edges, or hatches have different thickness. Right? Question, will we have a choice of hatch patterns in the future? I will say that we've had a number of users ask for hatch, the ability to customize the hatch. And I will say that many users have asked for that, so it wouldn't surprise me to see it in the future, but I'm not aware of plans underway today to customize it. In an ideal world, it would map automatically and just be correct to whatever the material selection is that you specify. But I do understand the argument of wanting to customize what that pattern looks like. And of course, if you haven't already, please submit that as a feedback ticket. But I know a number of other users have asked for that ability, so it wouldn't surprise me to see it in a future update. But I'm not aware of anything active as in today. So that is the views tab within the drawing property file. And this is again the key thing that you would do here is adjust line thickness within your drawing. And that's another very commonly asked question. Next to that is construction geometry. Like the name implies, this is where you'd set the color, the thickness, the style of center marks, and those kinds of details within this drawing. And then finally, you have format options. The unlock and lock format option is here. Also, you can change things like the border frame color, the border frame thickness, the border zones and their definition, the title block zones and its definition. So this is where you would set those format level options. Now, one commonly asked question when I show the drawing properties panel is, what if I wanted to save everything that I've set as a custom template? Remember, by default, when you change anything in these tabs, you're changing it only for that drawing, right? So you're not changing the template. The next time that you go to create a drawing, it's going to be the default way that it was when you started with the last one. And so what you'll want inevitably is to make changes to these and save them as a template so that you don't have to go back and make those changes over and over again. This is assuming, of course, that you don't already have templates or you don't need templates. But if you need templates, you can easily start with the Onshape provided template like I've done here and customize these things. So I can customize, what is the note font or what is the line thickness that's default, right? What is the units and precision that I want by default? Once you've set all of these things the way you'd like them, right, you can right-click the tab, choose Export, and choose the DWT option. DWT will allow you to save that as a drawing template, right? And you can give it a name. We can call this the What's New template. Right? And if I hit export, that will save that template to a file in this, or to a tab. It saves the file to a tab in this document. And the reason that's important is the next time I go to create my template, I will see the What's New template as an option to choose from. Right? So that's how to take all the customization you've done in the drawing properties flyout and make it a template that you can use over and over again. And that's probably one of the most common questions I get when I show that drawing properties flyout. But keep that in mind, especially the store file in a new tab. That will actually save it to a new tab within the document, which means it's automatically usable the next time you go to create a drawing. Right. All right, so a few questions. The changes made to the drawing properties overwrite your template. Forgive me, I'm not sure I know what you're referring to. Changes made to in the drawing's properties flyout should not impact the template. Right? This should only impact the drawing that you're currently in. If that's what you're experiencing, please let us know. But that should not be the case. Right. So if I go through that process of export to DWT, save it as a tab, put it into a document, that should not update for every subsequent drawing that I make based off that. Right. So if that's what you're seeing, please let us know. Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. I mean, can you keep it from updating the font? I think the question is, can you prevent others, forgive me if I'm wrong here, from changing the font or changing the units or changing those details? No. No, there's no way today to stop the drawing properties from being changed. Forgive me if I'm misunderstanding that question. When I export as DWT, my notes with linked properties are converted to plain text. Yeah, so it should... I know that I've done that myself in the past and that it has worked, so forgive me. Are they linked? Well, I would say submit a feedback ticket. We would need to look closer. That is a common workflow, though, and that is inserting notes with linked properties and saving that off so that they automatically populate. That is a common workflow, so if that's not working for you, please let us know. It's been a while since I've tried that, but if you wait around to the end, I can give it another shot and see if I'm seeing the same thing. All right, so that is drawing properties flyout. Now, the flyout itself is new. Again, this wrench icon is how you access it. It's on the right-hand side. That's how you fly out, and you see all the various tabs with all the various pieces of functionality. There are a lot of new bits of functionality that are introduced with this new flyout. Things like the ability to adjust dimensions and annotations, the fonts independently of one another. That was a limitation in the past. That's no longer the case. You can adjust those independently. The ability to adjust line thickness. That was a commonly asked question that we just couldn't do in the past. We now can. And also the ability to adjust color of things like dimensions and so on. That was, again, a limitation. So this drawing properties flyout solves a lot of those individual questions. Right, about how do we change color, how do we change thickness, how do I change those kinds of details. And this will grow, of course, as we start to get more and more options. So drawing properties flyout, again, you'll see it on the right-hand side, the wrench icon that was previously in the toolbar, now accessible on that right-hand side flyout. All right, so that is the drawing properties flyout and everything that comes with the drawing properties flyout. The next thing I want to mention is the MinMax Dimension improvement, and this is especially important if you find yourself dimensioning to the outside of arcs or the inside of arcs very often. And the trouble could be when you try to drag the dimensions to those points. So let me give you an example. Let's say that I'm placing a dimension at the center of these arcs, and I later decide, you know what, I want to move that dimension. By default, when you select 2 points, or 2 arcs, I should say, it dimensions to the center point of those arcs. But you can grab and drag. What's new is the attachment points on the min and max points of arcs. So you'll see that point highlight there. That, or the top and bottom points, are what's now selectable and referenceable as points. So now I can attach those dimensions to the outside of the arcs, or the inverse, right, the inside of the arcs. The key there is you'll place your dimension and then left-click drag that endpoint of the dimension to the outside of the arc, right, to that attachment point on the far end of the arc. So that is the min-max dimension improvement. Again, the key improvement there is really just those attachment points on the far extents of arcs. Right, that was a limitation in the past, especially in situations where it wasn't a perfect quadrant like it would be in this example, but maybe an arc at an angle. Those types of dimensions could be particularly difficult. So that is the min-max dimension improvement. Let's move on. The next one on my list is the assembly improvements, and there are 2 assembly improvements to take note of that I have in my list here. The first is the ability to reorder mates, groups, mate connectors, and so on, right? And the next one is entirely new library of standard content. So standard content was something that we added about 6 months ago now, a little over 6 months ago now, and we've constantly been adding new pieces of hardware to it. And if, for those not familiar, standard content is just a library of nuts and bolts and washers and so on that makes it easy to insert into the assembly. What we've added with this update, the July 12th update, is the DIN standard and a bunch of hardware that comes with it. So that's the improvement that I want to mention. Quick question: do you have to drag them, or can you place them directly? And it's a very good question, and this is with regards to the min-max dimensions that I was talking about earlier. In short, the answer today is you need to drag them. So they need to be placed first at the center and then dragged out to the extent, the far extent of the dimension. But improving that usability is something that we're aware of, something we're working on. But as of today, short answer, yes, you'll need to drag them. All right, so let's discuss reordering the mates, groups, and mate connectors. Now, this is a relatively simple thing, but for a lot of users, especially in more complex assemblies, this can be a very big one. And the reason I say that is it can be a struggle to organize your instance list of the assembly. And again, the order of features in your instance list of the assembly really doesn't matter. It's not like a feature list and then it's calculated in order. So there was really no logic to forcing this to look a certain way. And so what we've allowed you to do is essentially grab and drag and move things around within this instance list. Now, I know for many users out there that may not seem like a simple or a big thing, but I know for certain users out there, they're really going to like this one, because as you start to get more and more mates, and then especially as you start to add more and more mate connectors, right? That's another common use case. That's where this really becomes useful. Another example is, let's say that I like to, group all the mates that are associated, all the fastened mates together, and maybe that makes selecting them easy. Well, now I can drag them all together and shift select. If you're not familiar with it, you can shift, select top and bottom, and it highlights everything in between. That, if you find yourself having to often suppress or unsuppress a group of mates at the same time, putting them together in the instance list makes them selectable in that way. And that wasn't possible in the past, and that sounds like a trivial thing, but it can be a very big deal if you're in that situation where you always have to hide or show a group of mate connectors, or hide or show or suppress or unsuppress a group of mates, right? Having them in an order that makes them shift selectable is a pretty big deal. So again, the improvement here really is simple. It's just now you can grab and drag and move things around in the instance list. But what it allows you to do, I think, is the big thing. And as I mentioned before, a lot of the last two improvements really hovered around performance and usability. And little things like this, go a long way towards that. All right, so that is the ability to reorder groups, mates, mate connectors, basically anything that you'll find under this mate features list, you can grab and drag. Another thing I would stress is you can select a number of mates if you need to, right? I can select a number of these and drag them all at once. So you can shift select, or you can control select and then drag a number of them up and down as you see fit. You don't have to do it one at a time. I guess that's my big thing to stress, right? Good question that's asked quite often. Sometimes the instance tree gets really long. Is there any hope that you'll be will allow grouping within a folder within the tree, which can then be opened up to see the individuals? It is something that's highly requested. And if you haven't already, please use the feedback tool and request it. I would say that it's definitely high in our list of priorities. And many users have requested a tree structure to the assembly, the ability to store folders within that tree and then have sub-assemblies and top level assemblies even within that folder structure, right? So it's something that's definitely on our radar. I don't want to make any promises about new features, but and when they will be coming, but definitely high in our list of priorities, and not just at the assembly level, but also at the Part Studio level as well. Right. Now, the thing about the Part Studio that I would stress is we have a search feature that makes it a lot easier, but that's not necessarily, always the case, as you can see from the assembly level. So definitely use the feedback tool if you haven't already and submit that. I know a number of other users have, so it wouldn't surprise me to see it in a future update. All right, so that is reordering mates, mate connectors, groups, everything at the assembly level. Finally, let's talk about new standard content. We launched standard content very early on in January of this year, and we launched with just the ANSI and ISO standards. So up to this point, up to this update, we really only had ANSI and ISO hardware available in standard content. And the next most popular library that we got that was requested is the DIN standard. So as of this update, if you go to standard content, you'll see a new DIN standard as an option. Now, I'm not going to go through standard content or all the details of what's been added in this standard, but just realize if you're using DIN hardware, I highly recommend checking out the new library of hardware that was added as of this July 12th update. Right, so DIN bolts and screws, large library of bolts and screws, and of course you have all of your components and size options to choose from. In short, we didn't have DIN before. We do have the DIN standard now, and you have that as an option to choose from. In the past, we just had ANSI and ISO. Right? Now, keep in mind also, we're constantly adding to this. So with each update, we're adding more to each of the standards, and then adding more standards, of course, as we go along. Right? So we launched this in January. We've added the DIN standard as of this month, but we've also added a lot of individual pieces of hardware in nearly every update, in between. So that is the new DIN standard in standard content. Again, just in your assembly insert under standard content, you'll see that new option for DIN. All right, so let's move on to the next update. Now, this update happened yesterday. So we just pushed this update yesterday, and it included a lot of performance and usability improvements. A lot of little things that would make our hardcore users out there really smile. And we really focused on those little details that can otherwise be very tedious. So as I mentioned before, usability, performance, big stress factors for a lot of our users, and things that we try to make smoother and smoother. So a good example of this is the ability now to reorder multiple features. This is a small usability improvement that makes reordering in Onshape a lot easier. And I'm talking about at the Part Studio level. So when you're designing your part, you have all the sketches and features that go along with it, and you want to reorder something. In the past, you had to drag features one at a time to their new position in the feature list. So if you had 5 or 6 different sketches and a feature and you wanted to move them all halfway up the tree, you had to move each one individually one at a time. So what we've added in this update that came out yesterday is the ability to select multiple features and then drag them all at once anywhere you want in the feature list. Now, again, it sounds like a real simple thing, but it's a big usability improvement if you find yourself doing this often. The problem here isn't necessarily the time it takes to move them one at a time. That is a time-consuming thing, but it's not necessarily a big thing. The thing that would be difficult is it's easy if you're moving them one at a time to get the order wrong. And then all of a sudden things fail to rebuild and you have to troubleshoot why. If you move them all together as one unit, chances are you don't have those issues, right? So it's in general not just easier, but it means that it's just simpler. You can use it without necessarily running into issues. So that's reordering multiple features. I'll show you that in just a moment. The other thing I would stress about this is the rollback bar in general has been reworked to be more predictable. And in the past, you could grab the rebuild bar and it may jump around a little bit or up or down a little bit. That should be much better now. And we've worked hard to make the user experience for the rollback bar in general better. That was something that a number of users have brought up. I go to grab the rollback bar and it jumps too high up, and then I go to grab down and it jumps too far down, and it was just too sensitive and not necessarily user friendly. So we reworked that, and it includes the ability to reorder multiple features. All right, so let's get into an example of this. This is a relatively straightforward thing to show. Of course, this is going to apply, as I mentioned before, at the Part Studio level. And it's essentially very easy. The thing I would stress, the question that comes up very often is, can you select features that may not be in order, right? If I wanted to select, a number of these features um, and drag them, do I need to grab every single one? And the answer is no. You just left click and select all the features that you want and grab and drag them. What you'll see that's new is it tells you this is how many items that you're dragging, in this case 6, and I can grab and drag them and move them up in a predictable way, right? And you'll notice all the features that I selected moved up, but the feature that was between the ones that I selected stayed still. So it doesn't have to be contiguous, right? It can be a group anywhere within your feature list. But the key is, again, just left clicking and selecting the ones that you want. Now, as always in Onshape, you can also shift select. So if you have a bunch of inline features that you want to move them all at once, you can shift select the top and bottom and then just grab and drag and move. But the key thing is, in general, you don't have to grab and drag these one at a time anymore. That's the big thing. And as I mentioned before, it's not just the process of moving them one at a time, it's making sure that once you get them to their new position, that they're in the right order. That was the problem that many users had, right? So the ability to move them all at once just makes that much, much easier. The other thing I would stress about this improvement is we've, in general, reworked the rollback bar to be easier to use. This is something that in the past, it could be, somewhat skittish in the sense that it would jump around a bit and it could be difficult to get it exactly where you wanted it in the feature list. So in general, the rollback bar, the user experience around the rollback bar has been improved. That was one small thing, but I think users who use that a lot will notice it. All right, so that is the ability to reorder multiple features at a time. That's a small usability improvement, but I know users that do that often will definitely like it. The next one I would stress, this is really useful in kind of odd scenarios where you need a reference for an axis. So there are a few different commands in Onshape where you need an axis. For instance, if I'm doing a transform rotate and I want to rotate a part around a certain thing, I need to select some kind of an axis to rotate around. And in the past, you could select circular edges or you could select cylindrical faces, right? Any kind of circular reference that you had, you could select it. But the question always came up, well, what if you didn't have a circular reference, right? What if you didn't have a way to select a cylinder and define that as your center? And a good example of this is a circular pattern. Let's say that I needed to create a circular pattern, but I don't have a selectable circular edge or cylindrical face to reference that as the center of my pattern. And so what we've added with this update is now you can use a mate connector as a reference for an axis. And it will use the z-axis of the mate connector as the axis that you're referencing. Circular pattern is one of the common examples I can think of. If you've ever been in a situation where you try to do a circular pattern, but you don't have an easily selectable circular reference, right, whether that be an edge or a face, that's where I would use this. And the short answer is you would just create a mate connector at the center of what your rotation point for the pattern, and then use that as the axis in your pattern, right? And in short, you couldn't select mate connectors as an axis reference in the past. Now you can. And it will use that z-axis as the rotation axis for whatever it is that you're trying to do. The circular pattern is just one example, but also as the example I gave you earlier, transform. Transform is very common, especially for imported models, because a lot of times you would want to import a model and then all of a sudden the orientation isn't quite right and you want to rotate around by a certain axis that doesn't exist. Now you can create a mate connector and reference that, right? So that was the idea behind mate connector as axis. There's not much there to show besides the fact that if you need an axis, now you can click on a mate connector and it will use the z-axis of that. And that now works. In the past, it did not. I think, circular patterns, transforms, those are where it's most useful. But, if you've ever struggled to find an axis reference, this might be useful to you. All right, so the next improvement, I really don't have a lot to show. I'll show you an example model of it, but it's just one of those things that's altogether faster. There's no new feature here or new functionality per se. It's just what we've really worked hard on in this last update, the update we launched yesterday, and also in the July update, is performance. And performance in a few key areas, things like drawings, things like sheet metal. Sheet metal was a big priority for us in the last two updates, and we've been I would say fairly effective in the last two updates. And I built a few different example models to kind of highlight this. But in general, in more complex multi-part sheet metal models, right? If you're designing multiple parts together in the same part studio, we've cut rebuild time down somewhere between 20 and 30%. Now, the users that do a lot of, have built several parts in a part studio and they have a lot of relationships back and forth, things like cuts that go through multiple sheet metal parts and those kinds of relationships, they'll see the biggest benefit. They're going to see the biggest performance improvements. But in short, the realistic, 5 or 10 part studio where you've built all these sheet metal parts and they have all these relationships with one another, you should see a significant performance improvement in the rebuild time. I know the numbers are quite small there, but in the example, I took the same exact model, 15 features, so relatively simple, and you can take and scale it from there. But it went from a 12.5 second rebuild time to a 9.2 second rebuild time of a 15 feature sheet metal part, and it was 15 features, of I think 3 different sheet metal parts, all designed in the same part studio. And that's really the critical thing to stress. So if you do a lot of sheet metal, if you do a lot of multi-part sheet metal, designing multiple sheet metal parts in the same part studio, you should see a noticeable performance improvement in the rebuild time, right? I'll show you the question. Is there a way we can see the regeneration time? Yes. Bear with me for just a moment. In fact, let's jump into that now. So this is an example model. I did several tests of sheet metal just to see the significance of the performance. And in all the tests that I've done, and a number of us internally have done, it ranges from anywhere to 20 to even 30% in some of the tests that we've done. But it really depends on the type of sheet metal work that you do. But I think this is very common. And this is, I have 3 or 4 sheet metal parts that create this enclosure and housing, and it holds these parts, and very typical, sheet metal design. And the key thing I would stress here is in this example, there's lots of cuts that are shared amongst multiple features, right? So I see these holes that go through several sheet metal parts, right? Or in this case, just 2. But you can see a lot of features that tie multiple parts together. That's where the biggest performance benefits are being had. And I think that's a very realistic scenario, right? You're designing sheet metal parts. Chances are you need to bolt them together in some way, or fasten them together in some way. So naturally, designing them with respect to each other makes sense. So in this type of situation, and of course this is a very simple example, admittedly, but in situations of hundreds of features, you should see a noticeable performance improvement. Now, how can you check? Unfortunately, you can't go backwards and look at past rebuild times, but you can look at the current rebuild time right here. So in the top right corner of the feature list, there's a little stopwatch that says show regeneration times, and this will give you the feature by feature breakdown of what features are taking a long time to rebuild and so on. So just keep this in mind. This at the very bottom, the total regen time is the number that I'm referring to that we've reduced by quite a bit. And you'll notice it mostly in these cut features where I have cuts going through several sheet metal parts. These have been significantly reduced. And so if you find yourself doing a lot of that, chances are you'll see a pretty significant rebuild time decrease. Right. So one other thing I would stress is, in general, we're always working on performance. It's not something that's specific to this update. We're going to continue to make sheet metal faster, and we have more projects currently underway to do that. But I mention this only because it's fairly significant, and it's all in this one update. So just realize we are always working on performance. The other thing I would stress is this performance also relays to things like drawings, and we've made performance improvements in drawings, but naturally the performance improvements we make at the part studio level will also have an impact on drawing performance. So that's another area that we've focused quite a bit on lately. All right, so that is a simple example of the kind of parts that you should see a performance impact on. And again, this is something we're always working on, but if you do sheet metal design, and more specifically that multi-part sheet metal design, you should see some improvements. Now, the next improvements that I would mention come in the Learning Center. And the Onshape Learning Center is a number of new courses, a number of new videos within the courses, as well as an entirely new layout. And the layout is intended to be easier to go through, easy to understand your progress within the Learning Center. But the biggest thing that I've found, the biggest improvement, in my opinion, to the Learning Center with this update is the better search. So now you can easily search within the Learning Center. In the past, it was very prescriptive and you had to follow a certain path. But if you just jumped into Learning Center and wanted to look up a certain topic on a certain thing, it was somewhat troublesome to do that. It was somewhat cumbersome. Now you have an easy search inside of the Onshape Learning Center where you can search through the content. At this point, I think there's well over 100 videos in the Onshape Learning Center, all kinds of different topics pretty much throughout everything in Onshape. What we've added in terms of courses with this update is a course on configurations and advanced configurations. So we launched configurations in January of this year. Now we have courses that back up that new functionality. So we have part configurations and advanced part configurations as available courses in the Onshape Learning Center. And if you're not familiar with it, I won't go into too much detail, but you'll find the Onshape Learning Center at learn.onshape.com. Right, so learn.onshape.com. We have instructor-led training. The self-paced courses are what I'm referring to. You'll see a number of them down here. Here is a link to the advanced part configurations course. One of my personal favorite improvements to the Learning Center, though, is just this search. This was something that was lacking in the past. Another thing you'll notice about this is that it's far easier to understand your progress. One of the things that the Learning Center has is a dashboard showing you your progress and progression of learning Onshape, and now that progress and that dashboard is easier to understand. It makes more sense. So it's just, in general, like a lot of things in these improvements, usability, it's a lot easier to use. And again, we've added configurations and advanced configurations. We've also added a number of videos around various topics from assemblies and so on. So a lot of improvements to the Onshape Learning Center in this update. Another improvement worth mentioning, and this is to help. When you just browse to help, right? So I'm just going to do a simple search here, but when you go to the default help page, what you'll find now are a series of categories that you can jump into, and this is just based off of things that users need to find very quickly when they go to our help. So I can now tunnel down into modeling or release management or enterprise or our webinars. If I'm looking for a past webinar or Learning Center course, I can do all of that from this home page within the help. In the past, this was kind of scattered in different places, whereas now from the home page, we have these tiles where I can easily drill down into modeling help, right? And then I can get into features and appearances, materials, all the details that I need for modeling. Or I could easily drill down into the webinars, right? And start going in through all the webinars that we have either recorded or coming up. So it's a small thing, but if you use the help a lot, I think it just helps you to get to the thing that you need within the help, right? I think a lot of users in the past just defaulted to search, and that's fine. But now you have a way, if you're not exactly sure what to search for, to drill down into the topics that make sense for what you're looking for, and chances are you'll find what you need, right? So that's a small improvement to help, but something that's worth noting. Again, just if you're going to the help page, either from Onshape or just doing a search, if you get to this home page, you'll have these options to drill down to. All right, so the last improvement that I want to mention here, it's specific to Onshape Professional, but I do want to mention it because it's especially important if you're using release management. And the reason I bring this up is if you're using release management and you have your design released, you'll have a new option. And the reason I bring this up is we've always had the ability to insert versions, right? We've always had this ability to, insert versions, change to versions, and so on. And what we've never had in the past, what we've had in limited fashion, I should say, in the past, is the ability to reference a release. And it's a very different thing in Onshape now that we really haven't had the ability to do in the past. So the reason I mention this is one of the first questions that I get asked, let me jump over here to a different doc, is, now that I have my release, I've used release management, I've released my design, and I want to insert it into the drawing. How do I do that? Right. Well, now in the insert dialog, when you go to insert your part or your assembly, you'll see a revision view released items filter, right? And you can choose to insert only released items, or more importantly, you can change to version and then filter by revisions, right? And this in particular is what's new with this update. And the reason I mention that is, again, we get asked the question often. I've released part A, now we're ready to make a drawing of it. How do I insert that revision into a drawing? And the short answer is you can insert it initially, as I showed you, by clicking that filter, or you can insert your drawing or you could take an existing drawing or, insert the active and decide to change it later just by right-clicking the tab and choosing change to version. And what you'll see is this change to revision, where I can change to, from the active workspace to a revision, right? Hit update all, and it's going to go through and update the drawing based on that revision. So it's essentially taking that active workspace and swapping it with the revision. Very useful if you want to make a drawing of a released part or assembly where you know it's not going to be changing. This depends a lot on your workflow. I know a lot of companies vary about how they handle this, but if you're of the philosophy that we release parts and assemblies and then make drawings of them, this is a very big thing. The other thing I would suggest is, keep in mind, this is not just for the drawing. I can also change to version on parts or subassemblies within the top level. So let's say that I've inserted a number of parts and then I need to swap them for Rev A or Rev B. I don't want them linked to the active workspace anymore. I could right click, change to version, choose the revision that I want, and you can see I have choices, right? So just depends on what it is that I want to bring over. If I have multiple revisions, I will have multiple revisions to choose from to bring in. But the big thing I would stress is, again, just keep in mind that you can choose the change to version at the assembly level, or you can right click a drawing tab, say change to version, and it will allow you to do that, right? The big thing, the thing that I would stress is new, is the ability to reference the revision as an object. In the past, we could reference the version, but not the revision, right? So again, especially useful if you like to create drawings of released parts that have established revisions. Depends a lot on the workflow. All right, so that is what I had planned for you. I am going to stick around and answer any outstanding questions that you have. So one final thing I would mention just before I wrap things up here is if you have any outstanding questions about this functionality or any other features for that matter, please type them in. I'll do my best to stop and answer them. One final comment I would make, I've already briefly talked about it, but I'll mention it again here, is if you're interested in learning more, if you're new to Onshape or you're interested in learning more about Onshape, the Onshape Learning Center is definitely the best place to go. As I mentioned before, there's nearly 100 videos on almost every topic in Onshape, and they're self-paced. You can take them at your own pace, at your own time, or you can even sign up for instructor-led training, which goes through an Onshape instructor and a GoToMeeting course. And then we also have technical briefings on just miscellaneous topics. How do I migrate data into Onshape? How do I deal with my own parts libraries? Just little white papers that go over how to handle certain situations in Onshape. So lots of valuable learning resources. I can't stress this enough, especially if you're just digging into Onshape. A lot can be learned from the Onshape Learning Center. So that's it. I am going to stick around and answer any outstanding questions, so please feel free to ask them. But that's it, everyone. Thank you, and have a good day.